In this video, I'll show you how to use one of my favorite free tools to make your online reading lessons a lot more effective. Hey teachers, I'm Shannon, and if you're new here, welcome. I help ESL teachers refine their techniques and find more success online, and I know that one of the trickiest parts of transitioning from in-person to online teaching is figuring out how to make certain things like handing out materials, for example, that are very simple in a physical classroom work online through a screen. So, for example, in an in-person reading lesson, you could just print out the text and the questions or the reading tasks and pass them out to your students. So that way they have the questions in front of them or the task in front of them while they're reading the text. They can be both right there on their desk and they can do the task easily. But what about in an online lesson? Because ideally, you still want students to be able to see the questions or the reading task and the text at the same time. But when you can't just hand both of those things to your students, it's a little bit more complicated. So one option is that you could format the text and the reading task on the same PowerPoint or Google slide. You might have to play with the font size and the layout a little bit, but depending on the length of the text and the task that students are doing, you can hopefully fit everything on the same slide. So that way, when you share your screen, when you have your PowerPoint or Google Slide presentation pulled up, the students can be looking at that one slide during that particular reading stage. They can see the text there on the screen and the task on the same slide, and so they'll be able to reference the task as they're doing the reading. Another option would be to display just the text on that one slide and then send the reading questions or task separately, like through the chat in Zoom, for example. But what if you want students to read a longer text that's difficult to fit all on the same slide? Or what if you would like the students to actually be able to interact with the reading task, with the exercise, rather than just having to look at the questions on the screen or in the chat and write down their answers on a separate sheet of paper in front of them? And also, wouldn't it be nice to be able to see all of the students' answers once they do the reading task and be able to immediately get an overview of which questions were the most challenging overall and which ones were not as challenging so that you know exactly what to address in feedback to that task? So that is exactly where this tool comes in that I'm sharing with you in this video. The tool that I'm talking about is completely free, and it makes it really easy to share any length of text and any type of task with your students quickly just by sending them a single link. And it also allows the students to complete the task right in that same place by following that link, so they actually get to interact with the task on the screen rather than having to write down their answers separately. And it lets you actually view all of the students' answers so you can see individual responses and you can also see a summary of the group's responses. So the tool that I'm talking about is Google Forms. So let's head over to Google Forms now and take a look, and I'll show you exactly how to use it to make your reading lessons even more effective. Okay, so here I am in Google Forms, and you can get here just by typing Google Forms into your browser and probably clicking the first result that comes up. Or you can open a tab and go to google.com, and then as long as you're signed in, you do need a Google account to create a Google form. Just click on these little dots here in the top right corner, and once you click there, you'll see the option for forms, so you can get here that way as well. So once you're here in Google Forms, you're going to select this plus sign to create a blank form. This is what it looks like when you've opened a new form. So you can put the title here, and then you can add questions and other information down below. So let's say I want to use this Google form to create a reading exercise based around this article that I found on Forbes.com called 6 Things Lucky People Do That Others Don't. So this is where using Google Forms is excellent because, as you can see, this article is pretty long. So it's going to take some reformatting, and I might not necessarily want to use this entire article. Also, if I was to just send students this link and let them read the article directly on Forbes.com, as you can see, there are a lot of distracting things going on here in terms of the advertisements and, again, the formatting and all of that. So this way I can still use this article, but I'm going to stick it into a Google form, and then not only do I have my article in a nice easy to access place with no distractions that looks beautifully formatted, but I can also include the questions right there on the same form. So students can actually do the reading tasks and have the article right there all in the same place. Okay, so this title section on my form is a great place to put the article title. So I'll just head back over here and I'm going to grab the title, delete this, and paste it here. From here, the form description is a great place to put the source information. So I'll head back to my article now, and I'm going to grab the author's name, the website, any other information that I need to cite this properly. All right, so now I've added my source information here. And if I'm going to shorten the length, like leave parts out or potentially change anything to make it a little bit more accessible to my students, then I always put adapted from, since I've edited the original source a little bit. So from here, before we get into the questions, the next step is to put in the actual text. So in order to do that, you'll go here to this menu on the right-hand side. And this is where you can add any new elements to your form. If you click the plus sign, that's going to add only a new question, which is not what I want. I actually need a place to put in the text. So instead, I'm going to choose this option here, which is to add a title. So I'll click that. And now as we can see, it's added this area for me to put in a title. Even though this is called a title, I can actually use it just to insert text. So what I can do now is head back over to the article, and I can copy and paste the paragraphs that I want to bring over to my Google form. So I'll go ahead and start here. I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to leave out that little Twitter icon, copy this, head back to my form, delete this, and paste here. And this line, as you can see, was apparently linked in the article, which I don't want linked on my form because I don't want students clicking away and getting distracted. So I'm just going to highlight this and then unlink right here, and then fix that space. Okay, now I can add as many paragraphs as I like, and I'm just going to push enter a couple times to make a break in my paragraphs, and then go back and repeat that same process by grabbing more of the text, copying, coming back to my form, and pasting. So this way, if you want to leave out a paragraph or even a sentence for length, you can just sort of edit that as you go based on what you bring over into your Google form. And if I want to break this up even further, maybe into the different sections that the text is already divided into, all I need to do is add another one of those title sections. Now I have a new one, and so I can come back and grab this paragraph. I'm going to leave off the heading for now because I'm actually going to use that as part of a task. Copy this, bring it back to my form, and paste. All right, so now I've gone through and put in all of the paragraphs that I want to use from the text. At any point, if you want to preview this, so the mode that I'm in now is the form creator mode. This is what it looks like for me as I'm making the form. But if at any time I want to see what this is going to look like for my students, for the people that are reading the text and filling out the Google form, you can just go up here to this little icon that looks like an eye and click on it to preview what the form will look like for the person who receives it. So this is what the text is going to look like broken into the different sections. All right, so I'm back in my form edit mode, and I've just shown you one way to get the text into your form. The other option, if you prefer, is instead of copying and pasting the actual text and putting it into your form, you could just take screenshots of the text and insert those into your form instead. So for example, if you ignore this for a moment, and let's imagine we just have the title so far, I'm going to add, instead of the text option, go ahead one down and add this image option as the next section. From here, I can take a screenshot of a section of the text and then drag it into this insert box. All right, so once that uploads, here's what that looks like. And if I wanted to, I could even edit my screenshot first to get rid of that little Twitter icon if I don't want it to be distracting. But basically, if I go to my preview now, you can see what it looks like with the screenshot there. versus the text that I've added. So you can decide which one looks better. You can also decide which one works better for you depending on how much you want to edit the text. Obviously, the more you want to edit the actual text, the more it makes sense probably to just copy paste so that you can do that adapting as you go. But those are your two options for getting the text onto your Google form. All right, once I'm ready with the text, it's time to add questions or create the tasks. And the cool thing about Google Forms is that there are lots of different types of questions that you can create. So when I'm ready to create questions, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of my text. And there's already one question that's put in automatically when you first start a new Google form. So I can go into this question and adapt it. And the way I do that is just by clicking on the section with the question. And now it comes up with lots of options for how I can edit it. So if I want to keep this question as a multiple choice, which is usually what the default setting is, I can go ahead and type the question in here. For example, I don't know, what's one thing people should do to be lucky? And then I can put my answer choices in here. And if you just start typing an answer like this, you'll notice it doesn't say option A or anything like that. So I like to put in the letters first just to make them stand out a little bit more. Google Forms is kind of intuitive. So as you can see here, it's already, as soon as I put an A, giving me this option to add letters at the beginning of each option. So if you click that, it's going to put them in for you and make it just a little bit easier. So now I can put in my 4 choices. And again, I do that just by typing them in here. Okay, if you want to add more options, you can always just click Add Option here at the bottom. If you want to change the type of question, so multiple choice is just one option, but I can also click right here and change this to a short answer, a paragraph, check boxes, meaning that students can select more than one answer, whereas with multiple choice, they can only choose one. If you choose the check boxes format, students can tick all that apply. Or you could choose a drop-down menu. So for example, maybe instead of multiple choice questions for this first reading task, I actually want to have students match the heading, because if you look here in the article, each section has a heading. Maybe that's my task for this first reading stage, is I'm going to take the headings. I've already left them out of my text, and so now the task is for students to choose from the drop-down menu which heading matches with each paragraph. So I'll take the headings and I'll put them out of order. So let's start with this one actually. And so now I'm going to change this. I'll get rid of these and change this to a drop-down format. And for the question, I'm going to say, what's the best heading for section 1? And then I'm going to put my drop-down options here. So the first one was, they hang out with other lucky people. And then I'll just go through and in a random order, put in these other 6 headings. All right, so once I've put in my options for the different headings, for the first section, I'm going to go back up here and actually label that first section, section 1. So it's easy for the students to see which part they're trying to choose a heading for. And this paragraph was really just the introduction. So this is actually section 1. So I'm going to click on this and add section 1 here. And I'll do the same for the other sections. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to preview so I can see what it looks like. And it looks good. It's clear that the different sections are labeled. And then here is the first question, and I might even go back and add a number 1 here just so it's nicely labeled. And now I have a drop-down menu so students can go back to section 1 and choose what they think is the correct heading. Okay, and if I want to edit this question, because remember I want to add a little number 1 here, I'm just going to click on it and it opens my editor once again, and I'll add a number 1. And then what if I actually want to put this question right beneath section 1 so that the students don't have to scroll all the way back up to read that section again? all I need to do is just find these 6 little dots at the top of my question. I'm going to click there and hold, and then drag this back up on my form. And so now I can drop this right below section 1. So when I preview again, we can see that underneath section 1, there's the option to choose the best heading for it. Now I want to repeat this same thing for all of the other sections. And remember, it's going to be these same 6 options each time because one of them matches with each of the 6 sections. So rather than having to type all of this again, since I'm using the same options over and over again, what I can do is go to this little icon on the bottom of this question, which is to duplicate the question. So I'm going to click that. And now, as you can see, it looks identical to the first question, and all I need to do is change this to number 2 and change this to the best heading for section 2, and then I can leave everything else the same. And then I'm going to go ahead and click those 6 dots at the top again and drag this down so that it's below section 2. Now I'm going to go through and just repeat that exact same process, duplicate my question once again, and edit for the other 4 sections. All right, and now that that's done, one more thing that I'll show you when it comes to the questions is for any of these questions, and again, always just click on it to edit it, you can choose to make it a required question just by turning on this switch. So when you do that, when we preview it, you can see a little red star appears next to the question, which means that Google Forms won't let the student finish this task, basically, until they have at least completed all of the required questions. All right, so now we have our text and we have our task put into our Google form. Before we go further, let's make sure we save this with a title up here. And as long as you've put a title in this main title section, as soon as you click here, it should automatically populate that with the title that you've put in here. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is a couple of things that you can adjust in settings up here at the top. So one thing that I'm going to show you first is even though you need a Google account to create this form, you probably don't want all of your students to have a Google account in order to fill out this form. You want to be able to just send the link to this Google form and have any student in your online lesson be able to fill it out without needing to set up a whole Google account right there on the spot. So in order to make sure that's not an issue, I recommend that you go to settings and then you scroll down here to responses and manage how responses are collected and protected. Click that down arrow, and where it says collect email addresses, choose do not collect, and make sure this option here, requires sign in limit to 1 response, is not switched on. So if it looks like this, make sure you click it again so that it's switched off. That way, students won't need to have a specific type of email address in order to access and fill in this form. And once you have this setting configured correctly, the only downside to this is it means if you do want to see which individual students answered which particular ways, right? If you want to see which students got answers correct and which ones maybe struggled a little bit more, my recommendation is to just go back up to questions. And for the very first question, have the student put in their name. So maybe I'll even add this just below the title. And we'll change that to short answer and make it required. So now when we preview it, the very first thing the student needs to do is put in their name. And obviously you can change the order of this if you want the name part to be at the very bottom so it's not distracting with the title, that's fine too. Now that you have the content of your form created, the other cool thing you can do is change the way it looks a little bit. So the default color, as you can see here, is purple, but you can actually change that. And you can add a nice visual heading by going up here to this little palette icon. If I click on that, it's going to give me the option to change the theme. Not a ton, but at least a little bit. So if you want to change the font or the size of the font for the header, for the question, and for the text, for example, maybe I do want my text to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to change this to 12. And then you can also, as you can see down here, choose a color. So I can choose one of the default colors here in Google if I want to make this blue or green, and then I can even change how dark the background is. So you can't completely customize it, but you can at least customize it a little bit. And if you want to choose completely your own color, like maybe you have a particular brand color that you use for your own freelance teaching business, just click this plus sign here, and then it actually lets you put in your own hex code or choose whatever color you like. And then the other thing you can do is choose an image header. So if you click this, you're going to get a lot of different options of already put in stock images. So you can choose from particular themes. And when you click on a theme, you can scroll down here and see all of the different actual image options in that category. So maybe I'll try illustrations to find something that looks related to luck. Oh, and actually this works pretty well as something related to luck. Yes, I think I'm going to choose that one. If you'd rather upload your own image, for example, something that you create in Canva or a photo that you already have, you can just go to the upload option, and that's going to let you upload an image that you already have on your device. But I'll choose this one for now just so you can see what it looks like, and choose insert. Okay, and now as you can see, once I've chosen an image, the background colors automatically update to try to match that image as closely as possible. But if you don't like that, you can just go right back down here to color and choose a different custom color instead, or even change the shade of the automatically selected color. So maybe I like this one. Once you have the theme, the colors, and the header image the way you want, you can just click this little X to get rid of that, and then continue working on your form or finish it up from here. And again, anytime you want to preview it and see how it's going to look exactly to the students or the recipients of the form, just click that preview icon again. And here's what it will look like. Now I'll show you just a couple more things. So first, I want to show you what it looks like on your end as the teacher once students actually start filling in this form. So let's preview this again. And this time, let's imagine I'm a student in your lesson actually doing this exercise. So I'm just going to go through and put in some random answers so you can see what it looks like. So once a student gets to the end of the form, they've put in their name, they have the option to click submit. So once they submit that form, as you can see, the questions disappear, and their only option that they can see is to submit another response. If they do that, it opens up a brand new blank form that doesn't have any of their answers recorded. So I point this out because it can make it a little bit tricky for your students if you have them do a pair check, right? Like they've just completed the exercise on their own, they've clicked submit, and now suddenly, if you send them to breakout rooms to discuss their answers in pairs, and all they can see is this, right? So if they don't remember exactly what they put for each answer, it just makes it a little bit more difficult for them to talk about those answers. So I'm going to show you how to fix this in a second, but first let's see what it looks like on your end once you have students actually start to submit their forms and Google starts to collect their answers. So if I come back here to my edit mode, which again, this is what you'll see as the creator of the form, now, if you look, you can see that 2 responses have been submitted. So if you click on that tab, you can actually check out the summary of responses. And so this is going to show you an overview of how each question was answered. So here I can see out of the 2 responses, one person chose this option, they trust their intuition, and one person chose that option. So if I know what the correct answer is, I can now see if one of them got it correct or if neither of them did. I can then continue to scroll down and see that same breakdown for each of the questions. So here on number 3, I can see that 100% of people, both respondents, got the question correct. So this is great for you in terms of doing feedback because now you can go through and see exactly which questions everybody got correct and which questions there was some doubt about or that were clearly more difficult. And so those are the questions that you'll know to focus on even more in your feedback. You can also, if you click here on individual, see who exactly chose what answer. So remember, I had my students put in their names at the bottom of the form. So I'm now on the first individual. This is number 1 of 2, so the first person who submitted. If I scroll down, I can see the person's name at the bottom. If I scroll back up and click this little arrow over, this takes me to the second response. I can scroll down and see exactly which answers were Ben's. So Ben chose this option for number 6. he chose this option for number 5, he chose this option for number 4, and so forth. So if I want a little bit more insight into which students might be stronger or might be struggling a little bit and need extra help, I can find the information that way. All right, now for the students. As I mentioned, it can be tricky for them once they submit the form that it disappears. So here's how you can fix that. In your edit mode, go back to settings, and we're going to scroll down and choose allow response editing. So responses can be changed after being submitted. I'm going to switch this on. Now if I go back to my preview, I'm going to quickly fill out the form again. And this time, once a student submits the form, they have an option to edit your response. So you'll have to give students this instruction, like you'll have to let them know that this is there and how it works. But you can tell them if they've submitted a form before they go to breakout rooms, ask them to click edit your response. And now they can go back and actually see the answers that they've put in. So it's easier for them to discuss those answers in their breakout rooms. All right, and finally, the last thing I want to show you is what if you want to use this Google form as a homework assignment? So something you can do that's really cool is actually change the settings a little bit to make it so the correct and incorrect answers are already programmed in, and as soon as students submit the form, they can actually see whether their answers are correct or not and self-check. So this is a fantastic way for you to assign homework that the students can then complete and check on their own so they can do some self-assessment outside of your lessons together. So in order to make this work, go to settings, and now you're going to switch on this option that says make this a quiz. Here you now have the option to release grades, so basically to show the students which of their answers were correct, either immediately after submission or later after a manual review. Choose this option immediately after submission if you want students to be able to do that self-assessment. We can leave these switched on. And then if you want to actually give a score, for example, maybe I'll make each question worth 2 points. I can set the default value in here, or I can leave this blank and set an individual point value per question. You can also leave this blank completely if you don't want to take points, but you just want the students to be able to see which answers were correct or not. All right, and now when we go back to our questions, we need to program in which answers are correct. So I'm going to scroll back down to my questions. I'm going to click on question 1 to edit it. And now that I've switched on that quiz setting, you'll see that there's an added option here that's called answer key. So I'm going to click that. And now it asks me to choose a point value if I want to, and to select which one is actually correct. And in this case, it's they trust their intuition. So I'm going to select that one. Now it's highlighted as the correct answer. And if I want, I can even type in some answer feedback. So if it makes sense for you to type in some commentary about why this is the correct answer, you can go ahead and click this and type that in here. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll just put in, here's the info about why this is correct, and save just so you can see what it looks like at the end. So then I'll click done. And now I'm going to scroll down and do that same thing for all of the other questions. So I'll choose for number 2, answer key, and the correct answer is this one. Down to section 3, click on it, answer key, select the correct answer for section 3, and then I'll repeat that for all of the sections. All right, so now that I've done that, I've put in the answer key. If we go to preview again, it looks exactly the same for the students at first, but now, once I've gone through and selected all of my answers and added my name at the bottom, when I click submit as a student, it says my response has been recorded, and now I have this option to view score. So when I click on that, it's going to show me how many points I got if a point value has been given to each question. And when I scroll down, it shows me whether each of my answers is correct or not. And then there's feedback. Here will be some commentary about why a certain answer was the correct answer. So here it shows me that my answer was incorrect, and I can see that the correct answer was they trust their intuition. And if I scroll down, it will show me which of my answers were correct and which ones were not for each of the questions. So that's a great way to give your students independent exercises. I've used this for exam prep lessons when students wanted extra practice on the reading section of the test. I've also used this just as reading comprehension practice homework, where students can actually read the article, do the exercise and then self-check. So you don't have to do all of that in class. It's a really nice way for students to be able to do some of this on their own as well. You obviously just need to create the Google form. All right, so thank you for joining me. I hope you found this helpful. If you create your own Google form and use it with your students, definitely let me know in the comments because I want to hear all about how it goes. I hope I've managed to save you some trouble and give you a really fun way to create reading exercises for your students.